Hey. Okay, this is not going to be a difficult edit. This was pretty easy. So the first thing that I always do is just like straighten everything up. You're pretty good already, but I like to just make sure it's nice and straight, and then I do my like cropping right at the beginning because I'm a little neurotic about it. So if it were me, this is probably about how I would frame it. Okay. So here's what I would do. First of all, I'm going to bring the highlights down probably all the way. And then I'm going to bring the contrast up. My brightness is pretty good. Like your exposure is pretty good. I probably wouldn't adjust that too much, but I'm going to warm it up a little. Okay. Then I'm just going to bring in a little bit of black. And then you're going to, using the dehaze tool is going to be really helpful for you here, but it does add a lot of color and stuff. So I would bring up the dehaze and bring down the saturation a little, and then I would just go into masks. And I would start with the subjects. Sorry, I need a drink. Yeah, so I'd have them do the subject first. Okay. And I just add contrast. Probably bring up shadows and whites a little bit, bring my blacks down, and then start working on brightening them up a little. You can see that if I do that, we missed a few heads at the top, so you're going to have to go back in and fill those in. But that'll be easy enough. Yeah, so I'm just going to be like alternating between like warming them up and then adding more contrast. Brightening them up and then adding more contrast. I'm seeing like a lot of magenta as I'm starting to warm them. I think our overall image could be warmer, but we could also bring some green into this just to kind of help balance skin tones a little. But I think we do need to warm up the whole image. So I'm back to the full image. I'm going to warm them up a little bit more. Probably bring in a little more green. Okay. Now, this is like, these kinds of things are usually just a matter of like playing with things a little at a time and then just pushing it as much as I feel like I can. So again, adding a lot of contrast and a lot of black to kind of compensate for that haze. And then adding some dehaze. And then I would bring in quite a bit of green and maybe a little bit of blue. So blue temps, green tint, just to help with that color. And then I'm just going to be like going back and forth, like adding white, adding black, adding contrast, all that stuff. Okay, then I'm going to go back to this other mask and keep trying to match it. So yeah, something like that. I'm not going to go back in and fill in all these faces because it's a little time consuming, but you would just add it to the subject mask, and then when you're on the background mask, you just take it away with the brush off their faces. So okay, and then once I've got it to where like this is pretty good, they're pretty like I can see them pretty well compared to like this one. I feel like the contrast is pretty good. Like we can keep working on it, but it's looking pretty decent. Now I'm going to start working on color. So I'm just trying to get their exposure to the right spot, and then I'm going to start working on the colors. And I'm mainly working on skin tones. I'm mostly looking at like mom and dad here, but everybody's like still looking a little bit grayish. So I think we can warm it up a little more, add a little more green. I went to that retreat like a week ago, and she was saying she often fixes skin tones by adding green, which I never do, but it really has helped me so much this week. It's crazy. I'm like, oh, I did not realize I needed to be adding more green. We could pull our green slider a little more to the blue side if you wanted, depending on what kind of blues or what kind of greens you're wanting. And I think adjusting your yellow slider will help a lot too. Obviously that looks really fake, but bringing a little bit of the yellow slider a little more to the green is helpful. And then I like to bring my orange luminance slider up because it just like brightens everybody's skin up really well. So I usually do that. You could bring your greens down a little if you feel, I don't know, I feel like that's flattening it a little too much. Okay, so now at this point, I feel like colors are looking pretty decent. I do still feel like I'm seeing a little bit of magenta in their skin. You can go to the hue orange slider and just bring the orange a little bit to the yellow side instead of the red side. If you bring it to the red side, everyone's skin will turn like kind of red. If you pull it too far this way, everyone turns kind of green. But bringing it up a little will help kind of balance that a little bit. And then, another thing you could do, if you are on your tone curve, I like to pull the tone curve lights up a little bit. It just kind of brightens the overall image without messing with it too much. You can see how it kind of made the curve. It just brought it up, so it's not like completely straight. I'll show you what it does. So like pulling it too far would do that. So sometimes I'll pull that just a little bit to add a little more brightness. But yeah, like that's kind of the direction I'd go, and then you can just keep like working with it. And I would be a little bit tempted, since you do have the sunflower, like you could clone this guy out. I mean, you could probably even do it with the clone tool in Lightroom. It's pretty easy. Sometimes people are weird about sunflowers, like, I don't know, it's like distracting to them. So you could clone that one out, but with this one, I would almost be tempted to just either add an overlay right up here for a sunflower, or come to your masks and use a radial gradient and just stick it like right here. And I bring the temperature up, and then I bring the dehaze down, and then I'll usually bring up like my exposure a little bit and my whites a little bit. And then this one's looking like a little, I don't know, reddish to me. You could add a smidge of green. That way it's like a little more obvious, I guess, that there is a sunflower there. The sun is coming through the trees. And then they're not like, what is that circle right there? And you could try to clone out some of it if it irritated them, but I would kind of just turn it into like an artistic part of the image if it were me. Yeah, so then I would just keep working on it. Now that I'm like, I feel like it's pretty close, just keep like playing around with adding a little more contrast. That's way too much contrast. And stuff like that to try to make it like just how you like it. But yeah, this is like, sometimes I'll just spend some time just like messing with it, like quite a bit of time kind of playing with it. And then I will like literally just stand up and walk away for 5 minutes and then come back to it. And then I'm like, oh, I like that. Or I'll be like, oh, it still has some work to do. That's helpful to me. I don't know. Anyway, this is like probably what I would do. I would do it with masks and things like that, just to make sure that you're like getting, see, I feel like we can warm them up a little more. But that's too much. I don't know. I think maybe this mask is on the grass right here, and that's kind of what's throwing me off too. Oh yeah. So you'd want to go like erase the mask off of the grass there, because I think that's what's throwing me off a lot, is like the funny colored grass. But I think their skin tones are actually looking really good. So anyway, that's like what I would do. I would just continue to play with it, and then once you've got it the way you want it, just copy those settings to everything else. But I think you're totally good. Like, this is definitely, they're gonna be really happy with this. It looks good. So good luck.